Should I sell before I buy? Should I buy before I sell? This is probably a big question we get asked a lot of the time when people are coming through our open homes. So stay tuned for our thoughts. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Morning Minutes, episode 360. Can't wait till we get to 400. It's getting up there. Good morning, James. How are you?
Good, Michael. How are you today?
Good. Should I buy before I sell? Should I sell before we buy? I think this is a big question for a lot of people who are looking to basically for the second property. Obviously, if it's your first property, you just need to focus on saving, getting your pre-approval, and buy when you found the right home. But deciding, say if you're upgrading, downsizing, or just looking for a new property, it can be a little daunting of what's the right decision to do. And probably the easiest answer is it's whatever's right for you. Where I've seen people who buy before they sell, and they really prefer that way, or they've sold before they buy. James, what do you reckon some of the factors are if you're in a unit, you're in a one bedroom, you're thinking about buying a two bedroom? What are some of the factors you need to take in consideration if you should sell your one bedroom before you buy the two bedroom, and vice versa?
Yeah, sure. So look, not everyone's in the situation where they can purchase a second property without selling the first one. So for the most part, the general population, the majority of people would probably be in that boat. And a key little piece of dialogue that we try to just ask every single buyer that comes through an open home or on the phone or whatever it is do you need to sell before you buy? And that quickly tells you where they're at. But at the same time, for the most part, it's yes, I do. And what people will often do is they'll fall in the trap of getting excited, going looking for properties, but they're not in a position to actually purchase that in the first place. So it's just about working out exactly where they're at. And these little pieces of dialogue will help to find out which direction you need to push them in, whether you need to help them with that. You might be able to get an appraisal out of it. It can generate you more business, but it's simple little questions that might help to weigh out really where that buyer is at.
But just to elaborate what you said there, it's sometimes it's not about what they want to do, it's what they can do. And when you mean by you have to sell before you buy, that purely generally comes from a financial point of view. So they may have saved up the deposit, a 30% deposit, to buy that one bedroom home, but they may only have, let's just say if they didn't have that and they're buying a property for $1 million, you may need $200,000 to do that. The buyer may have $100,000 cash, but they're obviously short $100,000 cash to buy that two bedroom home. However, they may have $300,000 in equity in their one bedroom home. So when James means you may not be able to, that purely comes from they need to sell the one bedroom home to take out the $300,000 they've got there, add it to their $100,000, and now they've got $400,000 to buy that $1 million home. So a lot of people, there are a couple options that people sometimes do, where if they do really want to buy first, they may look at doing bridging finance, where basically they take out some of that $300,000, add it to their $100,000, and then they can secure a property there. But a big question is that people should look at if they're going to buy first is, do you have to have your current home sold at a certain price? Obviously, for this example, that one bedroom, obviously you'd love it to sell it at the highest price possible. But quite often, a broker will tell our clients, you need to sell for $600,000 to buy something for $1 million. Now, if you're selling a one bedroom apartment and let's say the agents appraised it at $570,000 to $630,000, but I would often say to my clients, for whatever reason, what happens if it sells for $550,000? Are you still able to buy that property for $1 million? And if they turn around and say, yeah, it's fine, we don't even need to sell it, or we could sell it for $450,000, our deposit's large enough where we don't have any pressure that way, which is great. My alarm bells go off when they say, no, we need to sell it for 630,000. And you're like, I'd love it. And you, as the agent, you're like, well, that's at the highest range of the opinion of value. Obviously, we'll work hard to get that, but you would hate to have a buyer locked into $1 million purchase and have to secure a higher price and may be achievable for their apartment. Because what can go wrong is, let's say they can't get the 630, they fall through on the other sale, shit can really hit the fan there. So, like, James, you've got to really look at all the ins and the outs, all the what ifs. What if we don't sell for that? What if it takes longer to sell? You've really got to address that as well.
Yeah, right.
Good chat. So, but also what you can do, talk about having a longer settlement, James. If you're, let's say you're looking to buy first or sell, where settlements are negotiable.
Yep. So generally, a reducible settlement is something that can be quite attractive to someone in that sort of situation whereby if they do sell and when they do sell, they can then settle on that next purchase sooner than later. So it does allow that little bit of scope for both sides so that it can move it along a little bit faster as well. So there are a few little different ways that you can go about it with just simple inclusions into the contract. And often you can try and tailor something that might be suitable for you with the vendor's needs that you might be purchasing off at the same time.
Yeah, so I'd always, if I was buying a property before I sold, I'd try and lock in a 12-week settlement with the ability to bring it forward. And that way because what you don't want if you're buying before you sell, you don't want the pressure of having to sell by a certain date. Because real estate, it's very unpredictable. We've had homes that you would think would sell within the first inspection or the first day and they take 10 weeks, and homes that we thought would take 10 weeks and they sell in 1 week. So it's very unpredictable. But one thing over years we've learned, whenever there's sort of pressure on selling, it's not good. So if you were going to, think about it this way, James, if you go to a buyer and say they have to sell today and the asking price was 650, then the buyer's going to be, 600. I thought they had to sell. That's the offer. Yeah. So you want to eliminate a lot of obstacles that way and the pressure. So if you do want to buy before you've sold, because maybe it's a perfect property, lock in a long settlement, 12 weeks, 14 weeks. It's whatever's agreed and negotiable. And you never know, that buyer, the seller of the home you're buying, may need to buy a property and they're open to a long settlement. So that's a good way to take the pressure off you, to have a long settlement. And exactly what you said before, James, you can reduce it. So you can have a clause in there that says, if we both agree, we can bring it forward within a week. And that way you can make it a smooth transition. Because what people sometimes screw up basically is the timing. Because you don't want to be out of one property before you're ready to go into another property. Because one, you need somewhere to live and you got belongings to take there. I've seen horror stories where they've bought and the other property, they mistimed it, or there was actually a delay. So it wasn't intentional, but they had to put everything in storage for 2 days. Yeah. They had to rent an Airbnb that wasn't available. They ended up paying like $1,500 for the night. It was crazy. So it's very important to give yourself a bit of leeway and sort of work through those dates. And also with deposits, one hand, do you want to talk about having a deposit released, James? And that can be really helpful if you're selling a property, you have the deposit released and you can use it. Do you want to go through that?
Yeah, sure. So something that is a little bit, I suppose, gray from a solicitor's perspective is the releasable deposit clause that you can also have included in there. And that, again, can be just a way in which the buyer and the seller can try and work together, where the buyer knows that the seller is looking for another property. They need some money to be able to make a purchase, whatever it is, to get that next property. If you can be agreeable to have a release of deposit early in the contract, then basically just allowing this sort of synergy where they're working together for the same common goal. They're both trying to purchase property, get in at the right time. But from what you see, solicitors are a little bit shaken by it, because there are things that can sort of blow that up in the meantime. So, for example, I believe if there's a death before settlement, everything can go against the wall, basically. Do you want to explain a little bit about what can happen? Then Glenn was telling me a horror story from the other day where there was a death of the seller, and I think you said the deposit wasn't refundable in the end, then the sale didn't go through.
Yeah, so just to take people back, so a releasable deposit is when you're buying a property, you put down a 10% deposit to exchange the contracts, and that's held by generally the agency, the real estate agency in the trust account. We sometimes, the vendor will ask for that to be released to them so they can use that to buy another property. You know that example we said where they may have 100 grand cash, but they got 300 grand tied up in the apartment and they need an extra 100 grand to buy that other property. So they could use the 10%, which is going to them anyway, and just secure it that way. It's some lawyers, it's more that it's not that it's a gray area of between being legal and not legal. It just opens up some security issues, because obviously if it's held in the agent's trust account, if it's very easy to be transferred back to anyone. But on the example of a death, it would probably be from the contract's basically binding, so it would have to be a really shit scenario of a chain reaction, because even if the seller passed away, contracts to exchange, it would have to be a very unique one of almost the purchaser passing away, and then they wouldn't be able to get the loan. But even in that case, the vendor would have the right that we've exchanged contracts regardless of what's happened. It's still binding. One hand, it opens up a grey area, but on the other hand, it doesn't. Contracts are exchanged. Basically, that 10% deposit's not going back to the purchaser. It's going to the vendor if the contracts go ahead or not. Because if they default on the purchase, that 10% goes to the vendor anyway. So it can really open up and being helpful to a lot of purchasers for that cash flow when you're looking to sell before you buy or buy before you sell. So, but anything else you want to add on to that, James? I think that's a wrap for this morning.
Yeah, I think that's a wrap, Michael.
Perfect. All good. Thank you, guys. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, mate.